Hi, welcome back to Covell Conversations. I want to talk about something that I see in our industry more than I've ever seen before. This is not so much about clinical practice today, it's about the experience of a therapist. And of course, I'm talking about occupational therapy, probably PT and speech too, but really, I'm talking about across the board in healthcare. I feel like ever since the global pandemic, we have been taking some pretty hard knocks and dealing with being short staffed, too many patient needs, too many patients for what we can keep up with. And we're trying our best, but it's so easy to run out of steam. And I spoke at the Occupational Therapy Association conference in Colorado this last year in 2025, and also the American Physical Therapy Association conference in Colorado. And just to get a kind of a pulse on who I was talking to, I asked everybody who in the audience was feeling burnt out. And almost, maybe without, maybe a couple people didn't raise their hands, but otherwise everyone did. And I felt so sad about that. Yet I also know that I too have walked in the shoes of being burnt out as a therapist, a business owner at times. And when you get into that area of burnout, it's a scary place to be. So it's just been a tough landscape. So I was thinking about how to change things at my own private practice. And I started applying occupational therapy principles to the culture in my own organization. And I'm still really in the thick of it and figuring it out along with the contractors and staff that I work with. And so more will come with that. But I started applying some of the things that I do with patients, but really keeping the therapist in my mind's eye. And this can be applicable if you are a PTOT, speech therapist, fitness trainer, and the like, which is the type of people that I work with. But you can also use this if you work in a completely different field or if you're a stay-at-home parent. I mean, we all have stressors in life, and there's things that we can put in place to help us stay vibrant and capable of managing these different things. So when I meet with patients, like I just had a patient today about routines and building habits, and we know this, so many of us know that this is important, but we as practitioners don't always prioritize this for ourselves. And it took me a really long time to understand that, unfortunately. And I don't want other therapists to continue to put themselves on the back burner or thinking that therapeutic interventions are only for their patients. They work just as well for us. Our patients are a lot more like us than we maybe sometimes even think about. But some of the things that we put in place with them can really help us as human beings overall. And one topic I'd like to bring up today is what I call a resilience circle. So, what is a resilience circle? So, this is just a small group of people, and it should be intentionally put together, and where you have an understanding that you are part of somebody's resilience circle and they are part of yours. So, this could be friends, family, it can even be online. So here's an example. I went through infertility treatments for a long time and had a very difficult time getting pregnant and staying pregnant. So definitely rocked my world, was life-changing, and put me into despair, depression, and deep grief. So as one of the most challenging times in my life, one of the silver linings that came of that later, when I look back, I can see is I met three other women in a Facebook group of all places. One was in California, one in Pittsburgh, and one in Oklahoma. And we all had, if you're not familiar with IVF, a transfer, meaning they take a fertilized egg, which is an embryo, and you go in and have a procedure where that embryo is placed in your body with the hopes that that's going to become a baby. So we all had our eggs harvested, if you will, at the same time. We all had transfer around the same time. One of the ladies didn't have, the embryo didn't work, and it was the only one that she had. So she went through the whole process again. I had a miscarriage the first time around. So we all came to the table with these very vulnerable, very heartbreaking situations that we didn't necessarily feel like we could talk about with our other friends, maybe even our family. There were times that I didn't even feel, connected to Justin, my husband, because he was going through his own process and I couldn't show up for him emotionally. It was a really bumpy time. So I found myself leaning on this resilience circle day in and day out. And I knew if I sent a message to the group, one of them would answer. And that's one thing that's important about having a resiliency group versus an individual, because we can't be all things for all people, and we can't expect one person to be all things for us. So if you think about people that you can cultivate these relationships with, maybe automatically you're like, oh, it would be my two sisters, and my mom. That's fine. Other times, we might actually have to seek out people to be within our resiliency circle. And you can even ask people that maybe you don't know very well, but maybe you look up to them, or they've been through certain things that you've been through, and you'd like to ask them to be part of a group. And that can feel kind of cringy for some people, but it's not group therapy and it's not clinical. It's community. And if you think about long before we had smartphones and everybody had a car and things like that, we were in a community where if you've ever been to Savannah, the city of Savannah, you go through these beautiful areas of town, and there's these beautiful, they look like courtyards. They're set up and they have houses all around them, usually a church. And so people would gather there in the evenings and on holidays and commune with one another. And we've lost that. So there's times when we go through really tough times that we feel very alone. And then you throw the craziness of social media on top of it, and comparison fatigue, and never feeling like you're going to be the chosen one or that you're ever going to get ahead. And you can just become more and more and more isolated and less authentically connected to other people. So a resiliency circle should really be, if you visualize it, something like where vulnerability meets safety and problem solving meets compassion. So going back to my IVF group, there were times that, we couldn't necessarily find a solution to a certain problem. Like when I had a miscarriage, I didn't need problem solving. I needed safety to fall apart. And that allowed me to do that. My husband was with me when I found out about the first miscarriage at the doctor's office. And the IVF group, was the first group of people that I contacted, even over my best friend and my mother. Part of that was just ease, because it was all in my phone. And of course, with my mom and my best friend and stuff, I wanted to actually pick up the phone. But that's an example that a resiliency group can look differently. And I want you to start thinking about what that looks like for you, or how to create that. And then you can also look at, it can also be a place where growth meets accountability. So if you say, well, I'm going to do XYZ to, try to move forward, then the next time you talk to your group or anything like that, somebody might just say, hey, how's it going with that thing that you're trying to put into place? And in occupational therapy, we call this occupational support. And that means that we're creating environments, meaning this group is part of your environments outside of you, and habits that allow you and other people to flourish, right? So even if you're not an occupational therapist, I want you to think about, okay, when we think about all the things that we want to do that occupy our time, or what's meaningful to us, or what's purposeful, or what we're engaging in, how can we build people around us to help us have resiliency? And everyone needs that, even if we kind of carry ourselves like maybe we don't. And I think, when I talk to a lot of clinicians, we talk about patient care, documentation, the hustle and bustle of the healthcare system. But healthcare professionals and therapists, and anybody really working in a service organization, we carry a pretty heavy load, because we're helping people through really difficult times, whether it's physically, emotionally, socially, all of the above, right? And so when we're helping people and stepping into their world of grief, pain, fear, loss, end of life, frustration, depression, anxiety, it's a lot. And so it's easy for us to just start to dwindle. And we talk about this in therapy school, and I'm sure other disciplines do too. But once you're in it, it just sort of chips away. It can chip away at you a little bit at a time, and you may not even realize it's doing that until you start to have feelings that you don't want to have, like resentment of your job, overwhelm, burnout, racing thoughts, not being able to sleep, not being able to not wanting to go to work, that kind of thing. So we don't always have the place where somebody is showing up the way that we're showing up for others to say, how are you doing today? What is going on? So today I had my preschoolers uh, Christmas concert, and my other two boys have been through this preschool, so I know several of the teachers. They do a great job. And one of the teachers had her mother had a pretty life or death type of situation last year, and medically, and we knew that. And I knew her mom had been doing better and stuff, but I hadn't seen this teacher in quite some time. So I actually stopped her and said, how's your mom? And then after the concert, she told me she was fine and everything beforehand. But then after the concert, she pulled me aside and said, I really want to say thank you for asking me about that, because it's helped me reflect on really how blessed we are that she's doing so well. And it just means a lot that you asked me, because all of us just want to be seen. We want to be known. And it feels good when somebody remembers, like, how was your procedure? How was your husband's CAT scan? How are you doing? How's this? How's that? And to understand where you really are and where you feel like you can be um, authentically yourself as much as possible. And why we have to do this as clinicians, or that I recommend it for clinicians, is because it reduces our compassion fatigue. So we don't have to carry and harbor all the things. And if we do that, then we're going to help ourselves not reach the point of burnout. And it will increase our job satisfaction and our sense of purpose. And I say this even in the introduction of Covell Conversations. One of my dear friends, Lisa White, who is an occupational therapist also, and now works in the fertility space. So we had all these interesting connections. She always reminds me that we give from the overflow. And in a service-oriented profession, it is the expectation that we're able to give, even if we did just lose a family member or we are struggling with whatever it is. So if we can give space to and discuss what's going on with us, then we can often do better in our work. And I almost don't like saying that, because it's not about the goal. The number one goal isn't about doing better in our work. It's about doing better in our life experience, which then leads to us doing better at work, decreased burnout, less compassion fatigue. And of course, it models behaviors to your patients, and you can share about something that you've experienced that has been helpful. And it strengthens our clinical intuition, because we know how to use the tools that we're prescribing to other people. If we're telling people to go to a support group, or that they should seek out a counselor or something like that, but we're not dealing with our own stuff, how can we do that? I think we all have to face up with, all of us are damaged goods to a point. And so we need to handle that and do good work on ourselves so that we can help other people do good work. And what I'm trying to do is build a culture around that of trust, fun, compassion, commitment, where we as healthcare professionals can help each other stay accountable and commit to these higher level practices as healthcare professionals, but also just because we know that it's important, and we know it from the research, the evidence, the textbooks, the online courses, all the things, but we should also really know it like in the cells of who we are and as human beings, and to keep cultivating it. It's not just always striving and reaching a goal. It's about cultivating it from the inside out. Again, we give from the overflow. So if we're giving to ourselves and we're healing and we're doing well and we have that resiliency circle to help us, it's going to help us in all aspects of our life, not just our job. Patients can also sense when we're grounded and overloaded. And I was with a patient today who had previously seen an occupational therapist. It could have easily been a personality conflict. So this is definitely just a general example. But the patient's family member was there and said, I have not felt comfortable not being present when my loved one is receiving occupational therapy, but your energy that you're giving off is one of calm, confidence, and strength of intuition. And I took that as a great compliment because I try to cultivate that in my own life. And if my patients are feeling it, that's a win. That also means that my kids are going to feel it, my husband, my friends, and that's important to me. So we want to be a clinician that's doing well. It doesn't mean that life isn't going to kick us in the teeth sometimes, because it will. It just means that we have cultivated tools, and I think the word of the day is cultivate. My goodness, I keep saying it. But where we make good things happen. So if you've never said to anybody like, I'm overwhelmed or I'm carrying a lot or my energy is low, and those feel really cringy to be vulnerable, start thinking about why that is and where that connection lacks. Or if you know that there's only 1 to 4 people or something like that that you can have those conversations with, lean into that more so that you can get more out of that resiliency circle for yourself. And if you want to create a true resilient circle, you could even talk to friends, colleagues, coworkers, family members about doing that. And it can start very grassroots. We had in our IVF group, we had another woman that actually had started the group of the 4 of us. And there was a 5th woman in there. And that 5th woman, she did not feel, I'm guessing, she never told us this, but she did not feel as connected to us. And part of that could have been that her story was really kind of going down a very different path. But that's okay. So if you aren't with the right group, you might need to find a different group or seek that out. So you can actually look for people online or in person that you feel like are sharing maybe some similar, values, morals, experiences, and connect with them on that deeper level. And if you want to call it a resilience circle, you could call it something else. And, but talk about what's challenged you and then also what challenges them and what helped them. And sometimes it's just about showing up and being authentic with each other. So you might want to talk about things too, like I forgot to pace between my visits this week and I'm absolutely exhausted. So you want to talk to other coworkers, other therapists. You can share ideas. That's one of the most beautiful things when I bring the clinicians together is I learn from them just as much as they could ever learn from me. Even if it's a new grad that's been in the field for 6 months, I'm constantly learning from others. And then also talking about some of the skills that we know that work to help us be resilient ourselves and together. So a fellow friend of mine who's a physical therapist, we like to try new things when it comes to like breath work and meditation. So we went to a guided meditation with a sound bath in Fort Collins and just decided to also do a sensory deprivation tank and do some reflection on why we wanted to do that. So all of this, the resilience circle doesn't want to, it's not like you're coming into a support group and sitting in a circle and saying, I need help with resilience. That's not it. But to build these really solid relationships. And part of that is having to lean into them. But you guys can talk about, your environmental setup for success, like what's going to make you more resilient that way, and talk about it with others and how your habits are helping you or hurting you and what you want to do about that. And then listen to others' feedback, because it's about not just learning, but embodying new tools and new ideas and kind of having a heart space for that. So really, it's just about finding the people that you need, choosing some sort of rhythm. Maybe it is a text group. Maybe you meet in person. Maybe you do, desserts every month at people's houses. It can even be like your book club. You can incorporate other things into it. So I belong to a book club. I can easily just say, I'd love to really dig deep on a few of these topics with you ladies because I have deep respect for you guys. And you can make it as formal or as informal as you want to. If you do want to do something really formal, I would suggest, or more formal, I would suggest having like a time period that you do it. So maybe it's going to be 6 weeks, 6 months, so that there's an end. People tend to show up more consistently if they know there's an end instead of it just never ends. And you might need to come up with some group rules, like everything we talk about here is going to be confidential. I have a travel group that I go with, and have been. I think we just have taken our 37th trip together. And we know without a shadow of a doubt that what we share in that group is confidential. And it doesn't go back to our husbands. It doesn't go to our moms. It doesn't go to our other friends outside of that group. It stays confidential. We don't necessarily think that we have to say that, but we have discussed it. So these things don't have to be, a clipboard with a checklist, because you're building these trusting relationships and should be able to have these conversations with people. And then measure it out. If you're feeling like it's not fulfilling your cup, or you're not growing within it, then just like the woman example I gave you that decided not to be in our IVF group anymore, that's okay. But we don't want to just be in the group to be in the group. We want it to truly have you be in a resilience circle. So, and the research is out there as well, and I can include some notes with some peer-reviewed articles and some research studies that are very current to really talk about why that is so important in this day and age. And I talk about these subjects with a lot of my patients on a regular basis. And so if you are interested in having a resilience group, or you want to have an accountability piece to help you with that, or to help with patient care, I can help. I can send you a checklist for a resilience circle and what to look for. That's a freebie. That's no big deal. It's just something to help pour into the people in my circle, my network, my world. A lot of you are OTs, but not everybody. And I want all of us to be walking around in the world feeling like that some people really do see us, some people really understand us, and some people will always be there for us. And that there's groups of people that we can rely on and that we can call our own resiliency circle. So if that's helpful for you, I'd love to know it. If you have feedback, comments, please leave those for me. Please click subscribe so other people can get these tips, and feel free to share this content, because the purpose for me showing up here is to teach what I have learned in the hopes that somebody out there will take the information and run with it, because we all are either learning from each other or we're passing it forward. And some of the tools that I learned, I feel like have been life-changing for me, and I want to give those same gifts to other people. So I appreciate you being here. If you have another topic for Covell Conversations, or are interested in being interviewed, maybe you have a resilience circle or a story you'd love to share, I'd love to hear it. So stay in touch, and we'll see you soon.